Jordan is a first year from Honolulu, Hawaii. And his fun fact is that he went barefoot to school every day until 7th grade when he was required to wear slippers. Welcome, Jordan.
All right, thank you guys. So I actually got to Penn 4 years ago to start a doctoral program. So I'm really hoping someone gives a fuck about the game I was playing. And I'm really not sure they do. And when I first got to Penn, I felt like I didn't belong here, right? And that's not a particularly novel or like a hot take, right? A lot of people feel that way. There's like thousands of research articles about imposter syndrome, which is a nerdy way to say the same thing. But still yet, just because something's a common problem doesn't mean it's not a problem for you, right? I've never had the flu and thought like, oh, well, a lot of people have this, so I feel great now. And so I felt out of place. And one of the reasons I felt out of place is because I was from Hawaii. So I was way far away from home. There's way more cement here. And when I arrived, I truthfully had more bathing suits than I did collared shirts. By like a lot. And for some reason I always remember I didn't have a single pair of dress socks. I don't know why. And I also felt out of place because I was joining this weird doctoral program. I had taught for 6 years before this. So I was comfortable in a classroom, right, teaching math to students. But being a doctoral student, for real. But being a doctoral student was like you had to write articles and like publish stuff and research stuff and like review peers or something. And so that was all foreign to me. So I sort of didn't really know what I was doing there. But regardless, being like a human, right, I still really wanted to do really well. And at least I wanted to do like well enough so that like nobody could tell that I was a mess, right? That was the goal. Like well enough so that like when people saw me walking by, they'd be like, hey, look at him. You know, it looks like he's got it all figured out. You know, that common way that everybody talks. So suffice to say, I didn't quite meet that goal. On my second day in Philadelphia, I got a call from my advisor, basically my boss, who's like, we need you to come down to the central office, the main building, because they're putting on some training and I was supposed to be a coach for part of this training. And he was like, we want you to come down and meet the other two coaches that you're going to be working with. And I was like, that's all, I can do that and feel cool. Like, I'll do that. So I came down to this big, scary cement building, walked in, there were thousands of people, and I didn't know anybody. So I was like sitting there, you know, like we all do, we're like looking at our phone, like we're getting like 1,000 texts. Like, oh yeah, oh no, it's still 12:07. Like, it's totally wrong. So luckily my advisors found me, and he pulled me into a much smaller room, and he's like, here, meet the other two coaches you're gonna be working with. And that wasn't much better, because the first guy introduced himself, and he was like, hey, I'm an 8th year doctoral student. I published like plenty of papers. He was like saying he knew words that I didn't even think were really words. And then he's like, oh, and I also like taught for a number of years before that. And I was like, let's not throw that part out. Like that's like all I'm bringing to the table. So let's lean into that. So that was him. And then the next guy was even worse. He's like, well, technically I started teaching for like 16 years in a foreign country. And I was like, well, technically that's like over half my age. So like, I think you're done. I think that's all we need to know about him. And that's quite frankly, that was a big share. Maybe back off. So he went on against my wishes, and he was like, oh, I was also a founding principal to Harlem Children's Home, which is one of the most amazing educational initiatives in recent American history. And he's like, oh yeah, and I also work as a consultant helping to turn around schools and districts. And I was like, oh yeah, I forget that about me too. So this is them, and then I'm there like, I'm the guy who shouldn't be here. That's my introduction. And as this is happening, then my advisor comes in and he's like, hey, why don't you guys go introduce yourselves to this big room of principals? And I was like, well, because I'd rather be hit by a bus. Like, I can think of so many, I'm just spitballing. How many reasons do you need? I don't want to do this. That's all in my head, right? So I'm like, sure, I'll go. And so I'm walking down this like forever long hallway to my doom. And we get into this room. It's like 80 feet wide, feels like 18 football fields long, just filled with people in collared shirts, like staring up at us. And there's like this mini stage, and there's like 3 chairs. And I was like, well, one of those is mine, so that sucks. And they set us up in like the worst order, right? Just like how I was introduced to them, I was gonna be last. And I was like, this is a terrible joke. This is an awful grand finale. Like, in him, we don't know why he's here. Like, that's the three of them. So they're like, oh, why don't you guys like introduce yourselves? So we're just staring out at this sea of people, more principals than I feel like I've ever seen. And the first guy gets up. So he starts talking, and as he's talking, I'm like sitting there, right? Just kind of like, not doing good. I was thinking to myself, I was like, all right, what have I done in my life, right? Like, I'm from Hawaii, like I know that. I've taught for 6 years. And that's it. Like, I was like, what else have I done in my entire existence on this earth? There's nothing. I was debating. I was like, I could tell him my favorite animal is a goat. Like, it's not related, but like it would fill time. Like, is it weird, but it fills time? I didn't know what to do. So he finishes, and there's like this uproar of applause. Like, I feel like everyone's giving him a standing ovation for just introducing himself. So then he's done. So then the next guy starts. So now I'm like, all right, so I'm totally next. Like, this is getting very real. And at that point, I was sort of like, my brain was done thinking. So it was all just visceral. So like at this point, I like started like leaning over and like grabbing my legs weirdly, like and sort of like rocking back and forth like a psychopath on stage. So all these principals are like, oh, I hope that coach is at my school. So I'm just sitting there, just a mess. And he's about halfway done. He started talking about his like work as a principal, and I can't quite explain exactly how it happened. But at a certain point, my brain just said to itself, it was just like, nope. And I stood up in the middle of this guy right next to me, introducing himself, and I was like, nope, just walked off stage. Gone. Ghosted the entire crowd. No explanation. Out the door, right? Gone. Down the hallway, and I went into a bathroom, because I was like, oh, most people can't follow me in here. Like, at least half the population is cut out. And then I went into a stall, and because I could close that off. I was like, this is my barrier of shame. And I just sat down, and I swear, this is the only thing I could think to do. I wasn't really thinking, but this is the only thing I could do is I sat down, I got out my phone, and I started playing Scrabble. That's exactly what I did. I feel like my brain at that point was like, you have messed up so terribly. Like, you have no right to be a part of the real world anymore. Like, you need some easy wins, right? Like, here's an L and an L and a B and an A. Can you put together the word ball? Like, let's get a W for this guy. So, ultimately, right, I finished my first game of Scrabble. And I start to realize, like, I can't live here, right? This is not where I'm like, ultimately, like, Jordan leaves this bathroom as part of my life. And so I walked back down the hall, and I was like, at this point, the presentation's long over, right? I'm not going back into that room either way. So I went back into that small room, and I walked in the door, expecting, I was like, I just basically expelled myself in my second day of this program. Expecting like jeers and people pointing and laughing like they do in like comedy movies, what have you, about kids. But instead I walked in and everyone's just kind of looking at me, sort of like with oven mitts, kind of like, oh, hey, like, you all right there? I crafted this story where I was like, oh, you know what? I'd taken this medication, right, for my strep throat, which was true, you know, great lies. Part of it was true. I did take medication for strep throat, and I was like, and then so it made me like really nauseous, right? Like, oh no. So I had to like when I'd run off stage, right, it just right then, I had to. And everyone was like, oh, okay, like that's obviously a lie, right? But like, you were in there for like 35 minutes. That was the best, that was number one. But everyone was nice about it, right? And then the only person that said anything was my advisor. And he was the only one who looked at me and he was like, huh, medication, huh? I remember looking, I was like, yeah, medication. And he was like, and it made you feel nauseous, huh? And I was like, this sucks right now, what are you doing? I looked at him, I was like, yeah. And he was like, and it made you feel nauseous, like, right then. And I looked at him, at this point, he's basically, I mean, everyone knows what's happening. I looked at him, I was like, I suppose that's what I'm telling you, right? Like, that is the story that's on the table. And in a funny way, this was really his way of telling me, like, hey man, like, we all know what you did, number one. And like, number two, it's fine. Let's figure out tomorrow. Let's move on past this. And in thinking back on this, ironically almost, if I could change one thing about that whole ridiculous experience, I would honestly change the way I felt about myself when I did it. I feel like it's so easy to like love ourselves, right, and be proud of ourselves when we don't need it at all, right? When you kill it, when you win a game, when you like nail an introduction, like it's hard. It's really easy to love yourself then, but like the times you need it the most, like it's the hardest. And in that moment, I was so disappointed in myself, right? I was set up, I was like, I just want these other people to think I'm great so much that I forgot all the reasons that I was. Right, and that's the thing I feel like I forgot about new beginnings and these new adventures that we go on. Like part of the point is that you are a mess, right? And you do feel uncomfortable and you do worry about fitting in. Like part of the great things about new beginnings is that like it's a beautiful reminder that we're all totally imperfect. And sometimes it's hilarious. And you know, it's being proud of and knowing and flexing our strengths can really make us strong, right? But owning our failures and loving ourselves, not just like despite those embarrassing moments, but because of them, I feel like that makes you invincible and that makes you ready to appreciate the like hysterical, wonderful, and amazing opportunity that every new beginning has to offer. Thank you guys so much.